All right, should we get started?
Yes, I'm really excited. Well, I'm always really excited to do this, but I'm more excited this week than I have been for the past couple of weeks.
Interesting. Well, I am perfectly content to start there. Do you want to say why you're more excited to talk about these chapters than past?
My favorite quote in the whole book is in the section that we read.
Oh my gosh.
And it's one that I think of constantly, like just throughout my everyday life. And there we also have, you can probably find vestiges of it earlier in the book, but we also have the emergence of an interesting theme in this section.
Okay.
Which you probably know what I'm talking about. But
well, I might know what you're talking about, but the quote you're thinking of does not immediately come to mind, which feels like yeah. I feel like usually if you say that, I'll know exactly what you're talking about and be able to predict it. But it is not at this moment immediately obvious to me what that would be.
Well, I might be being a little hyperbolic because it's not, it might not be my favorite quote in the whole book, but it's like at least top 3.
Okay. And it can be for reasons personal to you too.
It is, yeah. So I don't expect that it would jump out at everybody for the same reasons.
But I still feel like I can usually predict that from you. So, okay. So should we go back systematically in order to start? And then you mentioned a theme that's emerging, and I had some what I call big questions I want to make sure we have a chance to address at the end, which may be related to the theme you're proposing. So
do you mind if I bring up the theme now and then we can kind of work through it as we go through? Because I was thinking of it, because I don't know if I have a perfect way to summarize it in my own words. So maybe we can all help each other.
Okay.
So the way that I wrote it down on my little postie is real religion versus societal BS.
Okay, let's see what my words for it were. God as he ought to be.
Good. I love that phrasing.
But yes, we definitely have picked up on a similar theme. So we'll keep that one. So I'll just mention the 2 themes that were in my mind. One is God as he ought to be, or real religion versus BS. And the other is how one reaches that religion by a connection with nature or with what's natural to human beings.
Yes. And I also, sorry, I interrupted you.
It's okay. To the extent we get alienated from those natural impulses, that's where we get detached from religion as it ought to be, or life as it ought to be.
Yes. And if we have time, there's a poem that I would like to share.
Is it Wordsworth?
No.
Oh. I thought of a poem that I wanted to connect to this too, but it's The World Is Too Much With Us. So
I love that poem.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to chapter 12, last week when I talked to everybody, I was at my girls' graduation in Ventura. And so as I drove home, I was listening to chapter 12 in the car, and was exclaiming out loud the whole ride, like, oh my God, come on. I mean, just out loud by myself in the car. And that's my overall feeling about chapter 12. I think my note to myself was something like, to her injury were added insult, indignity, betrayal, contempt, derision, and condemnation. So we just come off of seeing her so cruelly treated in that horrific closing scene, only vaguely indicated, giving it even more horror. And then we just watch insult heaped on injury.
Right. Yeah. No, that first chapter of the second phase, I've written in the margins in that chapter far more than I wrote in the margins for any previous chapter.
Interesting.
And to be honest, there was quite a bit of profanity that I felt the need to write.
I wrote a lot of args, like just exclamations in my
That's more classy, but
I don't know. So let's just look at some of what those indignities were. I mean, I just have to start with the most significant one to me, which I have yet to be able to describe without crying. I just said the words that I was going to mention this scene, and I have tears in my eyes already.
I think I know what you're going to mention.
I'm sure you know. So, because I think we even talked about it the first time I read it. I always came running to you every time I was suffering and needed somebody to talk to about it. So it's the scene when she tells her mother. And Hardy is so powerful at making these scenes, by just adding a little touch that makes it heartbreaking, devastatingly heartbreaking. So the little touch here, which sparks something personal for me too, that I'm going to explain, but also it doesn't matter if it's personal to you, it just is a touch that makes it so painful, is that she put her face on her mother's neck. So it's such a gesture of like childishness and needing a mother's love and coming to her for comfort and confessing what happened. But just that touch that she put her face on her mother's neck and told. And then her mother basically pushes her away and says, and you didn't get him to marry you.
Why didn't you think of doing some good for your family instead of thinking only of yourself?
So I just
have the opposite of why she was there.
Right.
I also want to mention that the part about her putting her head on her mother's neck.
Yeah.
Not in.
What?
I know. It just says then Tess told.
Oh my goodness.
I know. So
what is that version? Why is
just the Penguin Classics version? I think it's the same one Molly has, but with a different picture on it. Yeah, Molly is nodding her head.
Gosh.
So no, once I got to that line, I was like, I need to go get, because the paperback version that I originally read is the same one you have now. And I gave that to Jimmy. So I need to go just rebuy that version.
Get this
clearly
one. Yeah.
It is superior.
Do you have any explanation for why there's a difference between the two versions?
So there is a little annotation next to it. So I was like, oh, it's going to include that line in the back, but it doesn't. Yeah. It includes an older serialized version, what it said, talking about how originally in the story, when it was serialized, I think in a publication called Graphic, that originally Alec tricked Tess into marrying him.
Right. Yeah.
And took advantage of him that way. So it was all about how she could pursue him with the law, but he didn't want to.
Okay. That is so interesting. Yeah, that little detail. So the personal element to me is that my daughter, Greta, who's now 21, I distinctly remember her putting her face on my neck when she was little and saying it fit right there, as if it was just constructed for that purpose. Like her face fits in this nook in my neck. So I associate that with going to your mother for comfort, that's where the face fits in their neck.
And less concretely, that's also what I associate with my babies. Like whenever I hold Edith, I have her head right here. And when Isaac is crying, he wants to curl up with his head right here.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful image.
There were so many lines that were emphasizing, we can forget that she's a child, but she's a child. So there was a line when talking about her baby, everybody shocked that she had a baby. Was that a big surprise? But it said of the baby, it was a child's child.
Child's child, yeah. Ugh.
Yeah. Okay, so some of the other indignities.
Talking to him. Talking to that guy.
Oh, the sign painter?
No, I was talking about Alec. I just was holding myself back from more profanity.
Just don't want to name him. Okay.
Only you needn't be so everlastingly flinging it in my face. I'm ready to pay to the uttermost farthing.
Oh, isn't he noble? And I've been driving like the deuce to overtake you just so I could drive you the rest of the way. Look at
Why
the
go
mirror.
off like this?
Look what you did to my horse.
Look what you did to my horse.
Yeah. And then when she looks nostalgically on the place of her birth, which I think of as, going back to a more innocent, reflecting on the more innocent time. And he's like, everyone has to be born somewhere, just take all the.
Oh my gosh. Oh, and the line, all women say that.
Oh, does it not ever occur to you that all women say what some women actually feel?
Yes.
Like,
Oh my gosh. I just
um,
I covered this page in writing, and in the corner of one, I was like, it's not about you. Oh my God.
yeah, he makes it all about him. So the other thing that was kind of my summary of this chapter in my mind, at which I mentioned to you, is that reading this chapter, I felt like she was raped by society as a whole, not by Alec, but by society. And so it just shows her complete betrayal by everyone, how it set her up for this, and then how society just turns its back on her afterwards.
Right. Yeah. I think
Um,
that that's really clear in this chapter and also the next one. I think the next one is completely dedicated to that idea
mhm,
that it's not her fault and she feels like it is.
yes,
So
yeah.
I agree with the statement. She was raped by society.
Okay, so Alec with his self-important, contemptuous, like making it a burden on everything about it, a burden on him, and making himself almost seem like he's being noble. And then the church betrays her too. With these, oh my gosh, that one of my favorite lines in a horrific way in this chapter was, he's painting his scriptures on the wall, and they're things that would condemn her as sinful. And she says at one point, well, is it a sin if it was not of your seeking? Because she feels like they're direct condemnations of her, that she's now impure and sinful. But can it be a sin if you didn't seek it? And he says, I can't split hairs. I don't have time to split hairs. Like,
It's just sin.
it's just sin.
Yeah.
So that's how society treats it. But
Exactly.
so it's splitting hairs to consider whether she ought to be judged for what happened to her. So the church gives her no comfort, no support. Her mother gives her no comfort or support. Alec heaps contempt on her. And
I think this is the first example of the real religion versus BS. Her running into this guy who's painting
yes, definitely.
the crushing, killing verses on the walls.
And so one of the things that interested me about that theme is that the other kind of big category, so we've got nature, we've got religion, and then the other big category that I've been thinking about in these last chapters is what is distinctive about Tess as a heroine. What's unique about her kind of particular sort of strength and innocence. And so here, there are several times that she defies religion. She says, if you won't baptize my child, then I'm not coming to church. Or if you won't acknowledge, have him buried, given a proper Christian burial, then I'm not coming.
And I don't like you. Yeah.
I don't like you.
And then the same thing when he is when Alec is offering to do things for her, and she says, I should be your creature to go on doing that, and I won't. Which is not specifically talking about the religion part, but this idea of her like taking the things that are not fair and just being like, nope,
that's wrong. Then that's wrong. So what's interesting to me about her character is it's an incredible strength, but it's not a strength that's larger than life. So one of the strange comparisons that came to mind is Joan of Arc. Like Joan of Arc defies religion too, but it's in this, with the persona of a leader and somebody who kind of takes on this great task, and Tess has just this kind of simple, earnest, quiet trust in her own judgment.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's this quiet confidence that I love about her.
It's like her confidence comes from the fact of just being completely honest and connected with her own human impulses, not from some grand principles. It's just, yeah. So
she's not like philosophical, but she's just her, and she's
honest, just her. Yeah.
And she's great.
Okay, so let's see if there's anything else about this chapter. Well, let's see.
Did you do quotes and chapter titles for this?
I didn't for all of them, but I'm pretty sure I did for this one. Yeah, and another on that category of standing up to society, when her mother says any woman would have gotten him to marry her after this, and she says, perhaps any woman would except me. How could I be expected to know I was a child when I left this house 4 months ago? So she doesn't accept the condemnation. She does to a certain extent, but when she's conscious of it, she's able to.
Like, this isn't my fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I did not have a quote for this one. I actually wrote no idea. I didn't know how to write it.
I had a hard time because what I usually try to do when I pick a quote is pick like the most important takeaway and then choose my quote based on that. But I felt like there were three in this, chapter.
Before you give that, so our most important takeaway is society heaping insult on her injury, right? Is that?
Yeah. So now that we've talked about it, I think that's the most important takeaway. I was more like basing it on plot when I was coming up with the most important takeaways. So, but I do think that my quote that I chose goes along with this most important takeaway based on all of those. I chose, I never had the chance of discovering in that way, and you did not help me.
With her mother.
With her mother at the end. Yeah. Talking about how she was a child and she should have been told that there was danger, but she wasn't. So she didn't. And then did you pick a chapter title?
I called it Veiled in Mist because it's like.
Yes, I was going to bring up that quote because that made me really sad.
Yeah.
The familiar green world beyond.
That green valley. Yeah, go ahead. What's the
now half veiled in mist. Yeah. So that's a good one. I ended up choosing Thy damnation slumbereth not.
Yeah. All right. Does anybody else have any questions or thoughts about this chapter before I see there's some stuff in the chat? Stefan says he felt a heavy burden reading these. Oh gosh, the heavy burden. Thank you for mentioning that, because one of the things I wanted to do is just point out the lines that I just pause on and go, oh my goodness, that is just such genius. And one of them was just, I think it might even be the opening line. The basket was heavy and the bundle was large, but she lugged them along like a person who did not find her a special burden in material things.
It's so good.
I feel that's again, when I said he's such a genius at having something that is both metaphorically significant and it works dramatically. So I can imagine someone lugging something along and appearing to be unconscious of the thing they're lugging because they're too distracted by what's going on in them internally. So that is concretely real to me, that image. But then that image is saying the reason she's so distracted is she's got this heavy burden in her soul. And that's a far heavier burden than the physical than a basket. So I love that line. And that we all carried that heavy burden through this chapter.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
I also loved the Shakespeare reference on the opening page of this part where it says it was beautiful. It was terribly beautiful to Tess today for since her eyes last fell upon it, she had learned that the serpent hisses where the sweet birds sing. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Ginger has a question. Or her hand up.
Perfect timing. That's Mark.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm clicking it.
I've been eating
Out.
Come here.
You can see what we're talking about. Yeah, I wanted to see it. I said that. Yes, I am Sigma.
So one thing I wanted to say about Tess's character,
yeah,
and what we're seeing in this story here is that every injustice that comes up in her life, she confronts it. She confronts it every time. And in so many fairy tales, it's so sad that the girl in the story is expected to be, just quietly, graciously accepting everything that comes along and just waiting for her savior. And it's just so beautiful to that terrible scene. Oh, that one wrecked me as well. There are times, oh, Spark. Hold on.
You're gone.
There are times when, can I say what I need to say, bud? You're not gonna let me say what I want? You might have to go upstairs in your room if you don't let me say what I want to say. Thank you, honey. So that scene with her mother, it reminds me that there are times when you might be thinking that this person should really know better.
Yeah.
But sometimes they really don't.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's just not their perspective, and you have to say something in order to help them understand what's going on with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, her mother is horrible, but at least she stops when she's confronted.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so refreshing to see the girl that's, all of these terrible things are happening to her. She's always confronting the injustice. Yeah.
And there's something I find inspiring about her variety of confrontation just being earnestness, not being conscious principle. It's just someone so connected with truth as they see it. And I'm listening to the Audible version read by a woman. I don't know what her name is, but I love her so much. And I love this version so much. And I think she does a really good job of capturing that quality in Tess, because when she talks, her voice it's just, it's innocent. Her voice is innocent and honest. It's not defiant and strong. And that's how I see her. Should we move on to chapter 13?
Yes, I'm so excited about a particular line in that.
Is this the one with the line?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so. Let me double check.
Okay.
No, it's not, but there's a different line that I love. It didn't even stick out to me the first time I read it, but when I read it this time, I just started to cry when I got to it, and it will sound silly until I explain.
Okay.
She thought without exactly wording the thought, how strange and godlike was a composer's power.
Oh, I
who
love
from
that.
the grave could lead through sequences of emotion, which he alone had felt at first. A girl like her who had never heard of his name and never would have a clue to his personality. Yeah. I underlined it, and in the margin, I wrote, like you, Thomas Hardy.
Oh, yeah. That was both a beautiful account of the power of music itself, and another example of this theme of her purity of connection with natural human impulse, and as opposed, and with religion even, as opposed to hypocritical society. So there was another line where it was talking about the innate love of melody. So it's that natural human innate love, if you're connected to it. The innate love of melody, which she had inherited from her ballad singing mother, gave the simplest music a power over her, which could well nigh drag her heart out of her bosom sometimes. And then it's a few lines later that it describes the parishioners who rested 3/4 of a minute on their foreheads as if they were praying, though they were not. So she has this connection with music that will tear her heart out of her bosom. And they have this phony kind of set of rituals that they go through that have no spiritual significance at all. So my summary for this chapter in a line was, Tess is scorned by hypocrites, admired by fools, guilty in her own estimation, and yet purely innocent.
Yep.
And I feel like we get it. I think you mentioned this with the last chapter, that we get that juxtaposition of her innocence and purity and their hypocrisy or foolishness or caring about vain, idle things. And
And the thing that stuck out to me the most in that chapter is the way that nature makes her feel that way. And Thomas Hardy goes out of his way to say that it shouldn't. So the way that I summarize this chapter in a sentence is, Tess feels out of accord Like she feels as though she doesn't necessarily think she did anything wrong, but everybody in the church is whispering about her.
Mhm.
And whenever she even goes out into nature, she sees the midnight airs and gusts moaning among the tightly wrapped buds and bark of the winter twigs were formulae of bitter reproach.
Mhm.
A wet day was the expression of irredeemable grief at her weakness in the mind of some vague ethical being whom she could not class definitely as the god of her childhood and could not comprehend as any other.
So
Caleb, yes.
Yeah. The filter of society has made her feel like nature itself is condemning her. God and nature are condemning her, whereas the reality is, this is a quote from the chapter, it was they that were out of harmony with the actual world, not she.
Yes.
It was social law, not any law known to the environment.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and is this the chapter with the lines about like, would she have felt this way if she were on a deserted island?
I can't remember, but it's
not. But it's the same idea.
Yeah.
Caleb has his hand up.
Yeah.
And then Molly.
Yeah, so absolutely, the comprehend him as anything else, that struck me so hard. And also I think it speaks about her, like, she really like was thinking about God and how important it was for the baptism of her child. And then you see her just kind of like seeing all that as foolishness. But something that happened, I think at the very end of this chapter was, and they were unaware of the ephemeral nature of their refuge. And then this is when they're like the grass is being mowed in order to make a field, and these little animals are scurrying to the smaller and smaller place in the field where they can escape to.
Is that chapter 13?
I wrote it as 13.
I think that we need Shoshana here. She'd know what page it was on.
I don't remember that part.
Okay.
But
I do remember the scene you're talking about with the.
Oh, somebody's saying that's the next chapter.
Okay. Okay.
I will
Come back and
Save the thought. We got Molly as well.
Yeah, so you were saying earlier that there's this broad social condemnation and she's questioning that. I see a few examples of that where she's in the church and people are kind of whispering and staring at her. Alec is certainly not treating her well. Her mother is not responding right, but they're not condemning her. They're not saying, you dirty whore, how dare you even pollute my sight. They're just not giving her the response she wants.
Mhm.
And also her friends are still friends with her. She's the one who withdraws herself. And so it's not lining up for me with what you're saying about this broad social condemnation. And there's a quote at the end of chapter 13 where she refers to Hardy refers to Tess's fancy, a cloud of moral hobgoblins by which she was terrified without reason. So to me, that implies she's imagining this condemnation, that it's really not happening the way she imagines, that she's withdrawing herself in anticipation of that, but that it isn't real. So there are these two things fighting for me. Now, I know that in general, yes, the church was condemning this, and the red letters is definitely a condemnation, but you don't see that in the individual interactions between her and other people.
It's true. So I went through this exact thought process myself, and I'm not sure I can offer a definitive conclusion. I think it's something we should keep in mind as we keep reading the book. I'll tell you what my feeling was about it when I reflected on that line that you're talking about. They're all hypocrites. So it's true that the girls kind of think she's cool because she has this scandalous thing in her background, but it's still scandalous. No one's going to say it's not scandalous. And it is going to bar, there's another line where it says her mom also, like when the girls think it's kind of cool, her mom's vanity is stimulated by that. And she's sort of proud of it, even though it ruins her daughter's reputation, even though it involves her daughter's reputation. So it does cut her off in reality, but it's just that nobody's consistent enough in their moral principles to make an actual condemnation when it comes down to it. So, but practically speaking, it forces her outside of society. So it's funny because the chapter title I chose for this chapter was moral hobgoblins, but I think of it more in terms of just the phoniness of all the moral standards. So they're inconsistent, they're not applied by the people who actually subscribe to them, but they're still there, and they still do mark her with a, scarlet letter or whatever. But they're just so shallow and inconsistent and superficial that there's no righteousness about preaching them. Mm-hmm. So it still feels to me like, I don't know, this is one of the broad questions I want to talk about. This book feels so Rousseauian to me. It feels so much like society itself is implicated, and it's when you're in harmony, or almost Tolstoy-esque, that it's when you're like in harmony with the land and with natural human impulses, that's when everything is good. That's the goodness of life. And to the extent you get involved in society, that's where all this hypocrisy comes in. So Molly, can we keep that as an ongoing theme and see what other evidence comes up as the book goes along? Okay, yeah, great.
I'd like to just know whether the hobgoblins are real.
Right. Whether that, because I know in that scene, it seemed to implicate Tess. Yeah.
The word hobgoblin is an imaginary.
Right.
Creature.
Right. So it could be imaginary in the sense that it's in Tess's mind, which is that one line seemed to suggest, or it could be imaginary in the sense that it's not real. They're not real. They're not, they have no basis in reality. And that's how I'm more interpreting it now. Because I don't think Tess is just delusional and thinking, oh, society is going to condemn me, but it's not actually. The stress seems to be on, if Tess understood that everything about her was in harmony with nature, there's nothing, nature's not condemning her, then she'd be fine. But it's that she's, to the extent that she accepts the burdens of social rules, that's where she's out of harmony. All right, should we go to 14?
Did you do a quote or a chapter title for that one?
I did moral hobgoblins.
Oh, that's right, you said that.
Yeah, but I didn't have a quote. Oh wait, I think maybe the quote was related. What was yours?
The title that I chose was because of Tess's personal feelings about the phenomenon that we're talking about. So I chose a figure of guilt. And then the quote that I chose was the last sentence in the chapter. Feeling herself in antagonism, she was quite in accord. She had been made to break a necessary social law, but no law known to the environment in which she fancied herself such an anomaly.
Yeah. So she's in harmony with life as it's meant to be, but she's out of step with society. Yeah. All right. Chapter 14. So it's a long chapter and there's so much we could talk about here. The categories I have are God as he ought to be. So that theme that you brought up, nature versus society, and then just her conflicted feelings about her baby, which reflects both of those themes, because the extent she's being, she's accepting those innate impulses of maternal affection. She loves her child.
Yeah.
But to the extent that the baby's face is a representation of her sin, then she wants to push it aside.
Right. Oh, this chapter.
Yeah. Where do you want to start?
I don't even know. Okay. So. Oh my gosh, it's so much. So I had essentially the same takeaways that you did. And I really had a hard time finding like my quote and my title for this chapter, just because there was so much in it. In the previous chapters, I felt as if we could pretty easily come to like just one or maybe two things that are like the main essentials, but this one felt a lot bigger.
I'm
I
really,
guess,
yeah, I'm really proud of my title. So if you want me to tell you what my title is. in one
yes,
second.
yes.
So
Start there.
I
That's-
agonized over it for the same reason, because of the things I just mentioned, her conflicted feelings about her baby, nature versus society, God as he ought to be. Like those are plot wise, theme wise, it's such a huge array. So my title was A Christian Burial.
Oh, that's a good one. I think that I chose The Girl Mother. I thought that captured the juxtaposition as well. But yeah, I think I like yours better.
Well, the reason I liked The Christian Burial is that it covered, she gave, in her mind, she gave her child a Christian burial, not in the mind of the church, but she believes she did. And it covers the loss of the child because we're talking about a burial. So,
right.
But so let's go back to the God as he ought to be, that theme that you brought up right from the beginning.
Yeah, because this is where you
really see it.
Yeah.
So it's right from the start, because the son is presented as a godlike figure, the son itself, but it's a godlike figure that's more natural than the Christian God of scriptures. So it says the luminary was a golden-haired, beaming, mild-eyed, godlike creature, gazing down in the vigor and intentness of youth upon an earth that was brimming with interest for him. So God as he ought to be is gentle and warm and looking upon the earth with interest and mild-eyed, not judgmental. That's God as he ought to be. And that's the God that Tess is connected.
Well, and even the sentence right before the one that you just read says one could feel that a saner religion had never prevailed under the sky.
Yep. The worship of the sun as the saner religion. And then Chad pointed out to me a little phrase that might have escaped my attention, but I'm so the baby was carried in a small deal box under an ancient woman's shawl to the churchyard that night and buried by lantern light at the cost of a shilling and a pint of beer to the sexton in that shabby corner of God's allotment where he lets the nettles grow and where all unbaptized infants, notorious drunkards, suicides, and others of the conjecturally damned are laid. So that phrase, the conjecturally damned,
yes.
Not the actual damned, the damned in the eyes of society and scripture.
I'm really glad you brought that up.
Great.
I want to give Chad a high five. I think that I skipped over that without realizing the importance of that word.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So anything else on the God as he ought to be that you want to mention here?
Well, the opposite with the person. What do you make of his reaction? Because it says that like he as the parson would have said, no, it doesn't count. But him just talking to her, does he really think that it counts, or does he just feel guilty?
I think he feels touched by her misery.
Yeah.
And he can't bring himself to say it, which I guess is to his credit. But yeah, he doesn't seem to actually mean it. He doesn't actually, I think it says that he doesn't.
He doesn't mean it. Yeah. Like, cause he keeps saying it will be just the same, but like, he knows that it's not. And then there's the thing that she thought, if Providence would not ratify such an active approximation, she for one did not value the kind of heaven lost by the irregularity, either for herself or for her child.
Chad texted me that quote too after he read it, and I responded, to hell with heaven.
Yep. That's a really good response.
To hell with it.
Yep.
It looks like we've got some hands.
Yeah,
up.
Stefan.
Yeah.
And then Kayla.
I thought for sure you guys would pick this as the title.
You're a little quiet for some reason.
Yeah, hold on 1 second.
Okay. I think that's gonna be better.
Is that better?
Yes.
No.
Better.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
So I had Poor Sorrow's campaign against sin. as the title.
Same idea.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really good.
That's all.
So it's the actual purity versus the societal condemnation.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's a really good choice.
Did Caleb have a
Thank
comment?
you.
Okay, now I get to say what I was
go.
going to say. So this the scene of the the field being cleared as like a slow and methodical sort of progression to a smaller and smaller space is also like Tess is feeling pushed out by society. She's now cloistered into her room, or was like this has happened to her to where she's cloistered into her room. And then it doesn't stop there though. He describes like the very eventual end is all these animals getting slaughtered, like their bones breaking with the like whole. It's like this is a lesson. Like you cannot stay still. You have to move. Like that was just so powerful.
Well, she does move.
And
there's more. No, but I mean in the next chapters that
yes.
and, she's gonna go be a dairymaid and life will begin again.
And then there's one more thing in this. I had so actually that quote was actually in chapter 13 for some people.
Oh yeah, because there are these weird differences that I've kind of been pointing out too between different versions.
Everybody go get this one.
Yeah.
Barnes and Noble.
That's the one, huh?
Edition. Then we can have the same page numbers and we don't leave out vital. Like it seems like the scenes that touch me the most are the ones that
aren't in this one. Ugh. But yeah, definitely. Now that we're in this chapter, I can remember what you were talking about with that. And yes, that's a really great insight that you've made.
And then there's one more thing on the when you're questioning like, did he really mean it, or does he think that like it is going to be after 10 years of effort, grafted technical belief on actual skepticism. And I think that explains his problem.
Yeah.
Like he's just, I don't know. There's
all he has is the scripture. All he has is technical belief. There's nothing personal. There's nothing that rips his heart out of his bosom. There's nothing, no direct connection he has with religion. All he has is the words on paper that he can then impose on her.
Because he's an actual skeptic. I don't know. That was
actually even
so
believe.
brilliant.
I know, genius.
Scott and UN.
Oh yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So yeah, just to answer that question, I think I think he's a mixed case, and he's another instance of society having grafted their laws on him, and to the extent that he's accepted them, right? And to the extent that he's not accepted them, or like, what she's done has actually made him feel something maybe that he used to, or something. And so so he's a very mixed case, and it's just Hardy kind of bringing out that contrast of her versus him, and really the difference that you see in society of the different ways that society's laws manifest in, or how you end up interpreting them, right?
Yeah, so he's a skeptic with these beliefs grafted upon him, but when he looks in her face, that's when a real human chord is touched in him, and so he can't just force that on her.
Well, and he even says, I would willingly do so if only we two were concerned, but I must not for liturgical reasons. I wrote "ew" next to that.
That seems appropriate. Okay, so we've also got this nature versus society theme. There's the description of the charm that's acquired by woman when she becomes part and parcel of outdoor nature.
I love the way he describes nature and people being part of it. Oh, it's gorgeous.
And this is where that alone in a desert island, would she have been wretched at what
That's
happened
right.
to her?
Yeah. And it
Would
makes
not.
sense in this chapter.
Mhm.
A field man is a personality of field. A field woman is a portion of the field. She has somehow lost her own margin, imbibed the essence of her surrounding, and assimilated herself with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the part of the image of the pure woman, the ideal woman. And it says most of the misery had been generated by her conventional aspect and not by her innate sensation. So that goes back to Molly, the theme that Molly brought up, but I still feel like it's consistent with the view that I've taken, because it's not saying the misery had been generated by her false views of society. It's to the extent that she's accepted the conventions of society, that's the extent to which she judges herself. But her innate sensations would have her not judge herself. If she remained purely connected to those innate sensations, she'd just love her child and be okay with herself and be in harmony with things. But her conventional aspect is what makes her self-critical. And I love, gosh, this is from the previous chapter, but there's that moment where she gets caught up in her friend's kind of fascination with her. And then she feels, when her honest nature comes back, she feels guilty about that and detaches herself from it. She just, she's always trying to do good. Oh, and oh God, a quote. I know this chapter. Now that her moral sorrows were passing away, so as she starts to, leave her cloistered room, her moral sorrows were passing and get back in touch with nature and work. Now that her moral sorrows were passing away, a fresh one arose on the natural side of her, which knew no social law. So once she's overcoming that condemnation by society, now she faces real pain in the natural world, which is the loss of her child. So the conflicted feelings, to the extent that society condemns her, she almost feels alienated from her own child. But when she's connected to nature, she feels this profound maternal affection that now makes her suffer misery of the worst kind and the loss of her child. But that, I mean, we've talked about, the experience of reading this book as there just being these scenes that are so powerful, so eternally memorable. If any of you come back and read this again, it'll just wash over you like this, like you lived it almost. And the scene of the baptism of the baby with all the children gathered around her and the candle. And oh, there's one quote that I had to share here. The kindly dimness of the weak candle abstracted from her form and features the little blemishes which sunlight might have revealed. The stubble scratches upon her wrists and the weariness of her eyes. Her high enthusiasm having a transfiguring effect upon the face which had been her undoing, showing it as a thing of immaculate beauty with a touch of dignity which was almost regal.
Yeah, I underline that part as well. It's so touching. It's such this image that has stuck with me after reading this book. Like I can close my eyes and imagine what that looks like. And I'm not super, like when I read things, I'm not super good at visualizing things. So it's really a tribute to Thomas Hardy.
Yeah.
Sarah's hand up.
Okay, yeah.
I was just going to say that this is my first time reading this book. And so, when the rape happens, you're thinking, what's going to come of this? Like, will she be pregnant after this? And the way that plot point unfolded, I thought was just masterful. Was like it just starts the scene, not even on Tess, and then Tess kind of comes into focus. And then it's lunchtime and you have the children walking up the hill and there's one carrying a doll. Oh, it's actually a child. And you're thinking, oh my gosh. And then she said, when she when she goes to feed the baby, just this sort of like subtle, like she's sort of like stealthily moving, and you just like that moment of realization for me, I just had to like put the book down and be like, wow.
Absolutely.
I had a similar feeling about the introduction of Angel on the scene. I'm just going to skip ahead and say I titled that chapter "The Voice Behind the Dun Cow." Because
I love that.
he's there the whole time behind the cow, just a disembodied voice. And well, we can talk about it when we get there, but I just thought it was a masterful way of reintroducing him on the scene too, that would have been lost if we hadn't had that sort of build up to it.
Mm-hmm. I love that title. That's great.
I would go Kathleen as well.
Okay.
Oh, you're on mute, Kathleen.
Hi, good morning. Just a quick comment about the introduction of the baby. When I read the paragraph where the baby's introduced, Hardy mentioned the big girl, her sister, gave her the baby. And when I read that, I thought maybe he was referring to sister as kind of a collegial friendship term. And it took me a minute. I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I'm going to admit it. I didn't know that it was Tess's baby. And then, of course, I got it. And then my jaw dropped. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's her baby. And it was interesting that there was no mention of a pregnancy or anything. All of a sudden, the baby just appears. So it just, hit me like this lightning bolt. Like, oh my gosh, she has a baby. And, to the previous point. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think that was intentional. I don't think that's anything to be embarrassed about. I don't think you're supposed to be sure it was her child until she starts suckling it. It just plays out in that incremental awareness way.
Anyway, I wanted to share that. Yeah, I got it after that, but it was pretty shocking.
Yeah.
No, I think that was absolutely intentional. Like this story originally came out in a serialized form. And so this chapter is supposed to be like, the big reveal of the baby. So I think that your experience was exactly what Thomas Hardy intended.
Yeah. Okay, next chapter?
Yes.
Okay, so chapter 15. My summary of this is why Tess has to leave home to have hope. So what it is about life at home that she can't, oh God, that devastating opening about lessons learned too late to profit from the lesson.
Yeah.
At last she had learned what to do, but who would now accept her doing? It had not been in Tess's power, nor is it in anybody's power to feel the whole truth of golden opinions while it is possible to profit by them.
Thou hast counseled a better course than thou hast permitted.
Yes. Oh, and that's again why I think she truly is outcast from society. I mean, these are the lines to indicate society will and has rejected her. She can't learn from her. She can't learn from her experiences.
The heartbreaking opening to the chapter aside, I love this chapter. I love it.
Because of the hope aspect of it?
Yes, I love the hope aspect of it. Her soul, that of a woman whom the turbulent experiences of the last year or two had quite failed to demoralize. Someone asked last week, like, can you give us something to look forward to?
There you go.
Yeah, there it is. The invincible instinct towards self-delight is something to look forward to. I cried throughout this chapter as soon as it started like revealing the hopeful aspects. And oh my gosh, this one and the next chapter are gorgeous.
So beautiful. Well, it was my quote for this chapter was, it was unexpended youth surging up anew after its temporary check and bringing with it hope and the invincible instinct towards self-delight. And then I chose the invincible instinct towards self-delight as the, you do?
Both.
Yes. Excellent. So yeah.
So I feel a bit jaded by all of this. So every time there's a hopeful scene, it seems like something horrible happens. Like even before the baby scene, I remember talking about her kind of coming out and she's going to go do some work and
Yeah.
feeling a bit optimistic. So like even when she goes to set off and the person comes to pick her up, I'm like, oh no, don't get in the cart. What's about to happen? I think everything is, that's why I messaged you. It feels like I'm reading Game of Thrones because everything bad happens, like to the good characters. There's always something bad.
It was fair to be suspicious of that driver since it says it was only because of her face that he picked her up in the first place. So
Exactly.
Yeah, well, Hardy maybe doesn't inspire you with a fundamental sense of hope, but at
I'm
least
suspicious of every hope he adds now.
suspicious of hope.
Now, every time before last week, I was optimistic.
Yeah.
Caleb has his hand up too.
Yeah, thanks you for letting me talk so much. I really am enjoying this.
We enjoy hearing your comments. So
We sure do.
So your initial comment about the advice too late to act upon is a broader narrative that nature, there's a quote like in the first chapters, because nature doesn't give the because to the why or the here to the where until later on. And so it's like it's coming up again, like you're always going to be late to the understanding and you'll just have to try next time.
yeah, that's awful.
But this is her trying next time.
Yeah, I know. Can we dwell for a moment in the in the hope? Okay, well, the next chapter is all hope, right?
Yes.
Chapter 16.
I love it. I love it.
Let's talk about, okay, from the opening line, how beautiful is on a time-scented bird hatching. Oh my gosh. I can smell it. I can hear it. I can feel it.
And it's May.
Yeah.
I just feel like I want to go outside and smell the thyme and hear the birds singing. Oh, it's so beautiful. I love this chapter. When I first read it, I turned to my husband and I said, I didn't know that one of the most joyful descriptions I could ever read was of milk dripping out of udders.
Oh my God. I know.
Isn't that incredible? It's just like that description was like, oh, this is where happiness is right here. I want to go milk a cow.
I have in my note those cows. I remember the things that I called you about or texted you about after you made me read this book. And one was the udders of the cows.
The udders of the cows and like the perfection of the shadows the sun was carefully casting as if they were a beautiful statue of Olympian shapes, the outline of Alexander Caesar and the pharaohs. I love the description of the cows. It's just like this idea of abundance and like hopefulness and the promise of joy. And I'm just like, give me a glass of milk.
This is where I think of the Wordsworth poem, and the world is too much with us, because it's there's the line about we're out of tune with nature. And so all of these images seem to emphasize what it is to be in tune with nature and connected to what's instinctive to human beings and what's natural in the world, as opposed to all these things grafted on. Was that the word with the?
I think it was. Yeah.
Okay. So that, I think the cows help emphasize that kind of a world.
I love those cows.
There's a line about
this is the chapter that has my line that I think
quote. Okay. Well, so
hey, can I just peep in here real quick? I just want to tell you that in my backyard, sometimes I get to hear cows, and it just, with this book, it's awesome.
Now it'll give you a new appreciation for the sound of cows. Yeah.
Yes.
I love farms. I want to go to a farm.
All right. So there's this line: women whose chief companions are the forms and forces of outdoor nature retain in their souls far more of the pagan fantasy of their remote forefathers than of the systematized religion taught their race at a later date. So it's healthier to be in tune with the pagan fantasies of your remote forefathers than to have absorbed the systematized religion.
I feel as though I am full of weird metaphors when it comes to Thomas Hardy. I've used a few of them. I have another one that I say about him frequently, which is, I wish I could live in a world where I was a pagan and he was a tree. He being Thomas Hardy.
Okay, I'm not sure that one's obvious to me.
Just because it's like the idea of like having this absolute like adoration of him and like him just being,
oh, I see.
You know what I mean? Like he has this idea of like this pagan-esque religion. And so I'm just like, I want to be that, but I want you to be the tree. So that's my weird.
So what's your quote? No more suspense.
Okay, my quote that the irresistible, universal, automatic tendency to find sweet pleasure somewhere, which pervades all life, from the meanest to the highest, had at length mastered Tess.
Oh,
it just makes me cry every time. It's so beautiful.
The invincible instinct towards self-delight.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
The sweet pleasure, to find sweet pleasure, which was the title of the chapter that I chose, to find sweet pleasure.
And mine was hope mingled with the sunshine. So I think it's the same idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Any comments on that chapter before we move?
Got Keelan's hand up.
Okay, you guys took a really wonderful view of the milk dripping on the ground. But to me, that was terrifying. So I'm already thinking about Tess being pushed out, you know, with the previous metaphor that he drew up. And then I'm thinking of this utter bursting to the full, and this life-giving sustenance falling to the ground and being wasted.
Oh.
So to me, it's like, where is she going? She's being pushed out, and then how will it end? Will she just fall and be wasted?
I see what you mean.
But I'm glad that you had a nice, joyful, abundant sort of thought to it.
Well, my thought is that she decides to leave. Like she could just stay and be, you know, upset with her surroundings, but she decides to make this new start. And so when she, you know, and the descriptions of nature as she's walking to this new, hopeful, beautiful place, I think culminate in this image of just like the abundance of newness that's there for her, the milk coming out. That gives me the image of abundance. I see where you're coming from, given what we've already read, for sure.
And then also, as we said before, Thomas Hardy does like two things with so much of these, like, he's also demonstrating that there is a real need by this dairy farm for Tess. Like it just quickly shows that they have too much production on these cows and they need somebody to milk. Like it's really important for her to be there. So that was so bundled.
But I look at the language that's used, though. It says all prime milkers, such as were seldom seen out of this valley and not always within it, nourished by the succulent feed which the water meads supplied at this prime season of year, those of them that were spotted with white reflected the sunshine in dazzling brilliancy. And then they have these ponders. I just thought of it as a place where one can go to be healthy and nourished. And so that's, I feel like, you know, Tess's decision to be a dairy maid is being confirmed as what will give her a chance to live again.
Yeah. And there's one more thing, and I'm not sure what chapter it's in because I think our chapters might not be right. So I'm going to wait on that, but it has to do with a drop.
Okay.
I think it's related, and okay, that's it.
Okay.
And Sarah has her hand up too.
Yeah, Sarah.
I put a quote in the chat that just to me was like such a compelling image. I just wanted to share about the fly on the billiard table. like limitless expanse. I feel like I've been to England and I was so taken by the green fields that would just stretch forever, and then the hedgerows around the edges of them, and that image just like it called to mind all of the places that I had been, but like in such a fresh way. And I felt like, again, this is just, I'm really taken by Hardy's ability to craft with language and to get you to see something in a different way that you've seen before. So I loved that.
I also loved that quote. I'm glad you brought it up. The hemmed expanse of verdant flatness, like a fly on a billiard table of indefinite length, and of no more consequence to the surroundings than that fly.
Yeah.
Just this immenseness.
Mm-hmm.
I love that as well.
Yeah, I like being reminded of that theme too, because I made the point, I think last time, that even if there are things that you fundamentally disagree with about his worldview, there are so many discrete, concrete insights that he's going to give you that if you pay attention to them, they both illuminate something for you that you might not have been conscious of before, that's real and true and valuable, and habituate you to being able to form those insights. Mm-hmm. So one here that's a little bit out of step with the hopefulness of this chapter, but I just thought it was so brilliantly articulated, is when she was pink, she was feeling less than when she was pale. Her more perfect beauty accorded with her less elevated mood, her more intense mood with her less perfect beauty. It's a perfect one to emphasize that theme again, that, you know, when she's caught up in her contemplations about society and her own condemnation, that's her more intense mood, but that's when she's less perfectly beautiful. And it's when she's in harmony with nature and not caught up in these mores of society that her beauty is perfect. But again, that just feels so Rousseauian to me. It's like almost the more we think, the more out of step. We have to rely on innate human impulses that even thought itself seems out of step with what it is to be a happy human being.
Yeah. I think that's a good connection to make. It is almost Rousseauian.
Yeah.
And I love her song, "O ye sun and moon, O ye stars, ye green things upon the earth, ye fowls of the air, beasts and cattle, children of men, bless ye the Lord, praise him and magnify him forever." Just like being overtaken by the urge to sing about the things that are around you. And I love that she like couldn't find the right one, and then that one was right. Just the singing about nature. I think that also falls into what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Okay, so on to the last chapter, 17. The voice behind the dun cow.
I love that title.
Just 1 second. Ginger has one thing quickly.
Oh, sure. Oh, you're muted.
So this might sound crazy to some of you, and maybe you don't like musicals, but I think this story, it just sounds like a musical to me. And it's so strange because it's so horrible. Like in the beginning, it's just so usually a lot of times musicals are all, you know, cheerful and stuff, but Les Miserables.
Les Miserables, I know. Yeah, that one works.
Anyway.
It could be
and
done.
the cows too. Like it's music is everywhere through this book, and I love it.
Yeah. Music is present everywhere, and it's explicitly talked about as music. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, we'll watch for more music throughout it too.
We should.
So Angel,
the voice behind the dun cow.
The voice behind the dun cow. We don't learn a lot about him. Just that he's too much taken up with his own thoughts to notice girls.
Again.
What else do you want? So Molly pointed out a line from this chapter in the Facebook chat that was absolutely hilarious. Do you want to share that line, Molly? Because then it prompted a reflection from me that I want to ask a question about.
Sure, that was funny. The dairyman was telling a tale about how you think cows are liking music while bulls really like music. I knew a guy Once there was an old aged man over a millstock, William Dewey by name, one of the family that used to do a good deal of business as tranters over there. Jonathan, do you mind? I know the man by sight as well as I know my own brother, in a manner of speaking. Well, this man was a coming home from a wedding where he'd been playing his fiddle one fine moonlight night, and for shortness sake, he took a cut across 40 acres, the field lying that way where a bull was out to grass. The bull seed William and took after him, horns aground begad, and though William run his best and hadn't much drink in him, considering 'twas a wedding and the folks well off, he'd never reach the fence and get over in time to save himself.
So the standard of not
the
much
standard
drink.
of drunkenness is how much alcohol is available and how much did you drink out of that available alcohol, not what's in your bloodstream.
No.
Yeah, but the second time through. I didn't catch it the first time through, but
were you pulled over by the police? The answer would be you should have seen how much there was. By that standard, I'm hardly.
By that standard, I'm not that drunk.
Okay, so what the reflection that prompted in me is, and I've asked this question before, there are scenes that are just, that was so entertaining, the image of the bull kneeling, thinking it was Christmas. It was hilarious, but I did have to stop and ask myself, why is this here? Why are we?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll give my first impression, but I want to hear from other people. I felt like part of it was dramatic reveal, like the baby, like I mentioned, that to immerse ourselves in this new society. And there's just kind of a benevolence, I guess, to the environment she's finding herself into by listening to this story. But by immersing ourselves here and then only later realizing that Angel is over there behind the cow, I try to imagine if that scene wasn't there and you just found that out right away. It would lose the impact that it has, the dramatic impact after listening to this whole story. I don't know. Anybody else have thoughts about that?
I can see that. I like that. I also think it goes to show just kind of like the new environment that she finds herself in at the dairy. I think it's just a really like happy place and they just want to laugh and have a good time. And so he tells this funny story, which is not something that would have happened back in Marlett or in Trantridge. This is like unique to this place for her.
Yeah.
I'm
happy for now.
Joseph.
I thought it tied in.
He's just like when
the people that they're just so ignorant that they really, I mean, half of them probably really believe that the bull kneeled down. I mean, the dairyman seems to really be sincere. I mean, he's not telling it as a funny story. We're laughing at it, but he's half serious, and the other people there are just innocently believing it and enjoying the story. And that ties in with the innocent, where did this baby come from? You know, she just appeared out of nowhere. Who knows where babies come from? The girls are really ignorant of adult life until they get pregnant. So it's this very innocent society that just doesn't understand nature or what's real, what's pretend. It's back to that pagan idea of just there are gods and everything is alive, and it's all part of that magical world where
but it's such a healthier place to be, with those, castles of her ancestors looming in the background, which might also be giving Joseph some apprehensions, because we know that she went to this place as her escape. But we also know that her ancestors are there. So yeah, it's interesting.
Stefan has his hand up as well.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, terrific. This is kind of going along with what you said, Joseph. This whole time, all this bad stuff is going on. I'm thinking about when Angel's going to appear and kind of bring some light. So that's kind of in the back of my mind throughout all these chapters. Now I'm wondering when Alec is going to enter the picture again. You know?
Oh.
Okay.
I can't wait.
Wait.
And Sarah as well has her hand up too.
About the cow story, which was really funny. I also thought it was interesting, not only that it like builds the dramatic entrance of Angel's voice behind the cow, but also in that he's introduced like by expressing skepticism. And so he's like offset from the rest of the people there. And the type of skepticism, though, is so softly introduced, right? Like, it's a curious story. It carries us back to medieval times when faith was a living thing. So he's not outright condemning them or saying like, that's a preposterous story, but just sort of softly introducing it. And his remark is described as singular for a dairy yard.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, because we said about Tess from the beginning that she's kind of a woman apart from everything around her. And that's immediately sets him apart.
Yes, exactly. And I see them as sort of mirrors of each other in a lot of ways. I just wanted to point out one other section I liked because of how different it was from the reaction of her, like the people around her in her village where she was from, was when the milkmaids are sort of chattering about the newcomer, and they say how pretty she is, with something of real generosity and admiration, though with a half hope that the auditors would qualify the assertion, which strictly speaking they might have done, prettiness being an inexact definition of what struck the eye in Tess. I just I thought, oh, like she's not
conventionally pretty.
Not conventionally pretty. And yet there seems to be, you could see that scene playing out differently, like the gossip that starts. Why is she here? Why is she alone? Like it just goes so differently in this area. So it made me feel some real hope that she might have an audience here, that there might be some way for her to kind of fit in.
Grace, I'm sure you are experiencing a similar like repressed urge to give spoilers because the characters on this farm are so unique and great. And that's not the last you'll see of those girls.
Yes. And I've made a point not to read ahead.
Good. Okay, good. No.
Stefan has his hand up again as well.
I have a question for you guys. Do you see the baby's death, as horrible as it is, as a lifted burden? Because it seems like Hardy could have used the baby as a device for extra burden, but I don't know if you see it as some sort of relief on her or not.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying, that, were she to have to bring the baby to the dairy farm, she's bringing her sins of the past along with her. And this is supposed to be a place. What was the phrase? It was, I want to find it, but I'm not going to. It was a place where she could leave all that behind. So yeah, I can understand that. A nook with no memories. That's what it was. She needs a nook with no memories, and that's what this place can serve as for her.
And then if she had brought the baby with her, obviously that wouldn't have been possible.
I want to point out in retrospect too, that you remember when Angel first appeared with his two brothers, one was a student and the other was a curate. And so they're both, in religion and academic, like they're both part of society. And here he is exploring various trades and being connected with the earth. So I feel like that theme is there again.
Yeah, the other brothers are parsons as well, but he's not.
And Caleb has his hand up as well.
So on the leaving the baby behind or whatever, there was that scene with the friends who were like, "Oh, you're cool, you got in with this guy," and then remembering the horror at moments, and like just the dinner party playing out, where she would fall back into this painful place. And I mean, at this moment, I think that she feels like elated and it's the start of something new. But there's also a description, I believe, somewhere in there, where it talks about like kind of what these experiences have put on her body, like just in the lines. I mean, this is how I remember it. I don't know exactly if it said this, but like I feel like it said something about lines in her face or something like that. Where
was it that quote that I read from where the candlelight didn't show the scratches on her arms and the
maybe that's where I'm pulling it from.
yeah.
But it speaks of this experience, and I think that her baby dying and her conversation with the parishioner, like all of these things are just like carved into her. And so in this moment where she is feeling joyful and hopeful, like it never goes away. Like she's never gonna not have had a baby that died. And so that pain, but also that growth is there in this moment. So yeah, that's what I want.
Well, she does. We can't end on this, but but she does. This is a nook with no memories in a sense, but the closer she gets connected with anybody in this nook, the more the reality of her past is going to be significant. So
absolutely, yeah,
you can't literally leave it behind.
Right.
So how do we end on a better note than that?
I can share the poem that I brought.
Yes, please.
So it goes, so I was also reminded, like you were, of The World Is Too Much With Us, but I was also reminded of this slightly more accessible poem that I really like. It's called The Church of Unbent Knees.
Okay.
And it relates, I think, to this nature theme that we've been talking about. As I went by the church today, I heard the organ cry, and goodly folk were on their knees, but I went striding by. My minister hath a roof more vast, my aisles are oak trees high, my altar cloth is on the hills, my organ is the sky. I see my rood upon the clouds, the winds, my chanted choir, my crystal windows, heaven glazed, are stained with sunset fire. The stars, the thunder, and the rain, white sands and purple seas, these are his pulpit and his pew, my God of unbent knees.
Oh, that's perfect.
It's by Christopher Morley.
Written when?
I don't have the year. I'll have to look it up.
Okay. That is so perfect.
I've kept it in my little, I have like a little collection of poems that I like. It's been there for years and I've never gotten to share it much. So I'm glad to have the opportunity. I'm looking up the year right now.
That ought to be featured at a school recital sometime.
Oh yeah. No, there's a moment in Anne of Green Gables that I think it goes with really well.
Okay. All right. Well, any other last comments or thoughts? Oh, I need to give an assignment, which I did not prepare. Let me look at that very quickly.
We can just stop here and imagine the wonderful good things that happen to Tess from here on out.
With your voice reminding us that we ought not. Oh, well, this works pretty well. Is 43 pages sufficient? Yeah, that's good, because then that brings us to end of phase the third.
Oh, perfect.
So it's chapter 18 through chapter 24. 18 to 24, just read to the end of phase the third. And I do recommend that you get the Barnes & Noble version. So
I'm going to be doing that today because I don't want to keep missing things.
Yes.
And Stefan said earlier on that subject, we need to all be on the same blighted star. So make sure we get the same
to end on a somber note. I want to go back to Grace's church. Church. Okay.
Thank you so much.
This just keeps getting better. I love this routine of Sunday morning so much. So thank you everybody for taking time out of your schedules to share this with us. I appreciate it.
Again.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Lisa.